So I want to talk a little bit about what we mean by co-teaching. First of all, a lot of people call when two adults happen to have the same kid on their caseload co-teaching, and that's not what it is. So at the very lowest of the spectrum, it's informal teaming. And that means Shelley has written the IEP for the student, and I am the general education teacher, and we both happen to have the student, but there is never consult time in the IEP. We never have a prep period in common, and we never plan together. So if we love each other like we do, we're obviously going to get together when we come to school early, or we're going to be calling each other on our commute home, or we're going to meet at lunch. It's totally dependent on our relationship because the system doesn't do anything to support us. And so a lot of people are in that position where it's like, I'm not quite sure either what barriers exist that will exclude students, or I recognize the barrier, but I'm not super informed about like the assistive technology or the specially designed strategies that I need to implement so that students can learn at high levels. So a step forward is that we are formally teamed, meaning that at the very least, we have time to work together. So maybe we have one prep period a week. Maybe there's 30 minutes a week consult in the IEP. We're on the same PLC team to really unpack what is it that all learners have to know and do. How will we design assessments that are accessible so we know if they can do it? And then what do we do differently if they're not making progress, right? It's really important that at the very least, we are formally teamed. And as a general education teacher, I truly believe that I could successfully include any student as long as I had formal teaming. Because as much as a general education teacher can implement specially designed instruction, they need to understand what it is they're implementing. And that requires a very close relationship and time with special educators. The next is the systemic integration. And systemic integration is when I'm a general education teacher and sometimes Shelley's in my room and we have time to collaborate, but like sometimes she's not in my room. And sometimes there's a teaching assistant in my room. And like true co-teaching is that Shelley and I are interdependent, which means that we co-plan, we co-teach, and we co-assess. All of those have to be true, or technically by definition, you are not co-teaching. Shelley is just systemically integrated in my class. If I do all the planning, and then she comes in and I'm like, can you just sit in the back with your kids? And I'm being super fresh right now. And then I assess, and then I'm like, ooh, that test didn't work. Can you modify that test for me? That is not co-teaching. Shelley doesn't work for me. Both work full time for kids, which means we work together. So in addition to being interdependent, which is co-planning, co-teaching, co-assessing, you have to effectively use all of the co-teaching instructional models. So as we plan, we decide when it makes sense to do alternative teaching, parallel teaching, station rotation. All of that is because we're looking at data and saying, oh, students are going to need different things as we examine that standard. So let's do a station rotation. I'll do this, you do that, they'll go through. And this requires more professional conditioning than you could imagine. So what ends up happening is sometimes we'll write an IEP into a ed plan, and we're only really supporting at assistant level what is systemic integration, which is at some points we're both in the room, but you are not getting any yield on the model if we are not having time to plan, to look at data, to use those different instructional models, and then ultimately to truly think about how together we can best leverage our collective expertise to meet the needs of all students. So that is where we are at right now. And as you can see, for me as a general education teacher, not only to really understand the variability, but to recognize what are potential barriers that will prevent all students from accessing those standards. And then how do I eliminate them by taking that specially designed instruction and incorporating it? That requires us to be together more. And so as Shelley moves on to her component and starts talking about how do we create these seed packets, she's also going to talk about this team kind of effort of implementing what we know those seed packets stand for.